Thoughts on the midterms. So, you know, I think a lot of people in the oil and gas industry and in the oil and gas producing states were hoping that we would see a different outcome for the Senate and a stronger outcome in the House that would have allowed Congress to put some pressure on administrative agencies to slow down some of this anti-oil and gas efforts, maybe even reverse some of it.
Hello and welcome to the November Director's Cut, the September 2022 production numbers. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Lynn Helms. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jessica. Apologize for the sound difficulties. Occasionally technology just doesn't do what you'd like for it to do. We are doing September production, so that's the normal 2-month lag, and there's some really good news in the September production. For the first time since March of this year, we're back about 1.1 million barrels a day. So a little over a 4% increase in oil production puts us 12% above revenue forecast at 1,119,000 barrels a day, and a little bit more. 96% of that is from the Bakken and Three Forks. The oil prices also pretty strong. September oil price, North Dakota market price was $81.24. That's 63% of revenue forecast. So very strong numbers coming in for state and county revenues. Okay. Turning to gas production. Gas production, interestingly enough, was only up 2.8%, a little bit under 3%. So a short-term pause in that increasing gas-oil ratio, but I think when you see Justin's gas-oil ratio graph, you'll see that it continues to increase and it's on an increasing trend. Great news is that gas capture was very strong, 95% statewide, 96% in the Bakken, with record all-time high gas production, record all-time high gas capture. And so 2 new records for September. We're steady in terms of the number of wells permitted, so continuing activity or interest from our oil and gas operators. Low rig count today. A lot of that has to do with the storm that we had last week and the inability to move rigs. So some serious difficulties there. The 39 doesn't represent a trend based on the information we're getting from field reports. It simply represents a problem moving rigs and rigs actually active and turning to the right. Uptick in rigs operating on federal surface. And so people are getting drilling permits and actually drilling on federal surface in North Dakota. Our 39 to 45 rigs compares to 106 in New Mexico. So significantly more activity there. It's kind of interesting that the New Mexico July to August production shows a cooling off of their month-to-month record setting, but they did set a new record in August at 1.535 million barrels a day. Waiting on completion numbers down just slightly. So still probably 50% above what we would consider an inventory, a normal inventory of rig to frac crew delay. So there's still a significant number of DUC wells that could be completed as we go through the winter months. Inactive well count down significantly. So in September, a very strong month in terms of well activity. I don't think that'll be the case for November. I think we'll see a lot of wells down in order to accommodate gas capture as well as the winter weather event that we just experienced. So we'll be watching for what happens when November turns around. Wells completed, pretty good number at 54, a little bit lower than July, August numbers, but quite a bit lower than September. So 54 wells in October, 81 in September. That probably explains nice production increase in September. In terms of producing wells, a new record number. And as you look at Fort Berthold activities, just pretty steady. When we look at crude oil inventories, U.S. and around the world, they're low. And so we're in for some reasonably high crude oil prices for the foreseeable future. And interestingly enough, natural gas is experiencing the opposite. U.S. natural gas storage is now just 2% below the 5-year average, and natural gas prices have returned to a more normal level of about $3.56 an MCF. All of our gas capture numbers are up. We still have the 4 fields that are struggling to build out gas capture and to really get the gas capture happening.
But even those numbers are up and improved. When we turn to the federal scenarios, I wanted to point out that on page 5 and page 10 of the director's cut, the Biden climate change agenda is alive and well. The Bureau of Land Management is going through a comment period on the social cost of carbon for a new EIS on permitting of wells that were leased in 2022. And the EPA is coming out with new methane control rules. And so the climate change agenda is continuing to ramp up the pressure on the oil and gas industry. Decline through the winter, given the rig count and the diminishing DUC inventory. And we think we're at a healthy enough rig count and frac crew count to maintain production, but we're not really expecting significant growth over the winter months. We think that we can maintain that 1.1 million barrels a day at rig count in the mid-40s and a frac crew count around 17. But as much as North Dakotans pride themselves on being able to handle winter weather, that's not what we're seeing after last week's storm. Now, keep in mind that we had record snowfall, well, near record. It was the second snowiest day in Bismarck on record, and Mandan and to the west actually was even snowier. So when we look at the U.S. DUC count, it's coming down significantly. And so it's going to be difficult for the oil and gas industry based on leases and permits, drilling activity, and the DUC well count to really significantly increase production nationwide. And I think we're going to see a flattening in the Permian. I think we're going to see a flattening. We certainly have seen a flattening in the Bakken and I think in the mid-continent. So there's a lot of pressure opposing increased oil and gas production. So there was a question about severe winter weather. Yeah, absolutely. Justin has a technique to kind of monitor natural gas movements, and the natural gas movements as of last week with last week's storm indicate maybe a 50 to 70,000 barrel a day drop in oil production. That's assuming that we maintain the 94 to 96% gas capture, and that's what our operators tend to do. It looks like, we were at 1.19 million barrels a day in September. October probably was up a bit from that, maybe 1,125,000. It looks like for November, things are really weak and haven't really turned around yet at this point. So probably a 50 to 70,000 barrel a day drop from those October numbers, which should keep us just above 1 million barrels a day, but not much above 1 million barrels a day. It certainly is going to drop us back below that 1.1 million barrel a day number for the month of November. Justin's aware of some problems and some issues in the midstream and gas transmission areas, and I'll let him speak to that. But overall, very positive news for the state, but the anti-oil and gas pressure for climate change continues to ramp up in every area, every aspect, with challenges to leases that have been issued, No third quarter lease sale, no projections for a fourth quarter lease sale from the federal government, EPA pressure, and Bureau of Land Management pressure. So it's going to be very difficult for our industry to respond with significant production increases. Thoughts on the midterms? So, you know, I think a lot of people in the oil and gas industry and in the oil and gas producing states were hoping that we would see a different outcome for the Senate and a stronger outcome in the House that would have allowed Congress to put some pressure on administrative agencies to slow down some of this anti-oil and gas efforts, maybe even reverse some of it. So what we actually see, since, you know, it takes both houses acting on a CRA to overcome any kind of administrative rule, is that it's going to allow continued pressure against oil production and natural gas production in the United States, and that's going to slow oil production growth. Certainly in the Bakken, I expect it's going to hold it flat.